So for this project you need your watercolor paper, your reference image, pencil, a watercolor palette, 2 cups of water, one for cleaning your brush, one that's just clean water, and a variety of brushes. So I'm going to start by placing my reference image, which I'm going to trace, onto a light box, and then I'm positioning that reference image exactly where I want it underneath my watercolor paper. And now I'm just going to go through and trace all of the outlines of the silhouette. So I'm going to put a fair amount of detail into tracing this, but depending on your image and how detailed you want it, you can either trace the rough outlines, or you can be really careful and trace all of these individual little branches and then even the holes in this tree in my example, because I want it to be pretty detailed. So I'm just going to go through, trace all of these major holes. I'm skipping the little teeny tiny ones, but you can see it looks pretty close to my reference. So now I'm going to go through with my watercolor palette, and I add a few drops of water to my palette and I make a nice watery color. Then I went in and used wet on wet to wet the paper, and then I'm dropping in that blue that I mixed. Now I'm mixing up some red, and I'm just going to drop that onto my paper and let it sort of blend in with the blue, and it made kind of some purple. That's okay. Here I'm wiping my brush and getting it nice and dry, and then I can take off some of the paint if I want it to have more of a cloudy, streaky sky. Again, just going in, adding in some orange, and I'm letting it spread on its own. When the paper is wet underneath, the color starts to sort of spread and move on its own, which is what I want. Now this tree has holes in it, so I'm going and painting right over the tree, so that way when those holes show through, you can see the sky behind it. And I'm just painting right on top of my pencil lines, and that's okay. You can still see through it if your color is really transparent and has a lot of water in it. So I'm going in, I added yellow towards the bottom, and then I'm adding in more red and more blue in different areas just to give it more of that watercolor effect. Now I decided to add in some more streaky lines to show where clouds are in the sky. So I'm doing this as a glaze. Underneath, my paper is completely dry, and I can add the blue on top, and it doesn't smear on its own. But I actually wanted it to blend a little more, so I put some water on my brush, and now that blue and now this red will kind of start to spread and smear a little bit if I have more water. So again, I'm adding in sort of a really transparent pink on top of the yellow just to give it more dimension. Now if you want to add back more white areas, once your paper is starting to dry, you can get your brush wet, a clean brush, get it wet, and you can rub it on the paper gently, and then put a paper towel to blot it up, and that'll actually take away some of your paint and add in some lighter areas to show some clouds underneath. So now that this watercolor is completely dry, I'm going to add my silhouette. So I'm adding my acrylic paint just in the areas that I had drawn out, and I'm just being really careful with my lines. So one way you can do this is if you put a bead of paint on your paintbrush, on the tip of the paintbrush, then you can really gently move that bead around to get nice clean lines. If you actually have less paint on your brush, I actually find it's usually harder to control where that paint is going, because if you start getting the individual little bristles putting paint down, it's not a nice clean line. So I'm just really carefully going in with a small brush now and filling in all of the areas of this tree, the branches, and I'm leaving those holes where you can see through the tree. And because I painted the watercolor on top of the tree initially, those holes have the color of the sky behind it, and that was really important. It would look strange if it was completely white behind the tree, but then the sky near the tree was colorful. So just carefully paint in each of these sections, and that's pretty much it. I'll wait for it to dry and I'm finished.